Okay. Good evening, everyone here in our audience in Toblach, and the many of you who are joining us around the world in the Mahler community. It gives me great pleasure to moderate this program that I've been asked to present here at the Toblach Festival 2021. I want to thank Hans-Jörg Fiedler, president of the festival, for inviting me and for inviting us, and Federico Celestini, who's running the Gustav Mahler dialogues, and he'll have much more to say about what he's doing here as well over the next few years. My name is Gustav. Well, if Freud were here, he'd be having a field day. My name is Martin Solvik. I am the vice president of the Gustav Mahler Foundation, as I wanted to say, and I'm also on the board of the International Gustav Mahler Society. I'm here, as I say, to moderate, but certainly not to dominate our conversation today. Federico Celestini, I just briefly introduced, is a professor at the University of Innsbruck, and he is also the head of the Institute for Musicology there. He is a member of the Austrian Academy of Sciences. He is on the editorial board of Acta Musicologica, the co-editor. He is also the president of the Austrian Society for Musicology. His publications range over many, many topics, not only Mahler, but such things as intertextuality, cultural context, and we're very glad to have you here, Federico. Thank you for coming. I would also like to introduce Peter Revers. Some of you who have been here at the festival have already heard him speak, as well, of course, as Federico. Peter Revers is a professor of historical musicology at the University of Arts in Graz. He is also the past president of the Austrian Society for Musicology, and he is the current president of the International Gustav Mahler Society. He is widely published, also especially in Mahler, most notably his book on Mahler's Lieder, his songs, and his most recent publication that came out this year on Mahler's symphonies in German, both published by Beck Verlag. The gentleman here to my right needs no introduction in the Mahler world, perhaps not in the classical music world. Thomas Hampson, baritone, and who has been inspiring audiences for decades on the concert stage and in opera. Mr. Hampson does a lot more than that. I think it's important to point out he has a foundation that has supported many initiatives, especially in support of promoting the talents of young artists and in providing internet resources, but also for pedagogical purposes. He runs master classes in Berlin and other locations. Heidelberg, yes, of course, and I'm sure other places too, but those are the hubs, okay, Berlin and Heidelberg. It's wonderful to have you join us this evening. Thank you for coming. And for those of you here in the live audience, you'll see that Marina Mahler has joined us virtually from her home in further away in Italy. Marina Mahler is the granddaughter of Gustav Mahler. She is the founder and president of the Mahler Foundation, and through her work and initiatives, she has been inspiring composers and thinkers and musicologists and people all around the world for many, many years. It's a pleasure and an honor to have her join us today. Thank you for coming, Marina. So the topic of our panel discussion today is the past, present, and future of the Toblach Festival. I'm not sitting here as someone who's been deeply involved in those components, but I've been asked to raise those issues in a way that goes through the past, through the present, but I think also focuses on what we have in mind for the future. In 1981, on the 70th anniversary of Mahler's death, there was a great deal of discussion about what could be done to honor Mahler's memory, as he was an important person here in the summers of 1908, 1909, and 1910. and it was decided to start a festival. And we are marking this year the 40th anniversary of this festival. I think the person on the panel here that came closest to the beginnings of the festival might be you, Tom. Want to say a little bit about what it was like at the beginning, who was involved, and of course you were an integral part of that too, fairly early in the process.
Good evening, thank you. Am I supposed to talk that way? And we're speaking English this evening? I can do that. I'm very good at English. I came here in 1985 or 86. Yeah, and it was very, very exciting because, I remember, I sang the first time I sang Knaben Wunderhorn, das Knaben with orchestra was in 1985, and somehow I popped up on the radar of Henri de Lagrange, and all of a sudden I got a phone call from the great professor, and he very timidly said, yes, he is Professor Henri de Lagrange. I am a professor and a biographer of, I said, of Gustav Mahler, I said, really? I said, yeah, Professor, it's fine. He was an incredibly mild-mannered man, and he said, I understand you like to do recitals, and I was just thinking, and at that time, I believe he was the artistic director of the festival, or he was a co-artist, and he said, I'd be really grateful if you would put together a recital of Mahler and his time, because he knew I was passionate about Mahler. I guess I had met him, I don't remember when I met him the first time, but never mind, that's not so much the point. So I took on this mandate, and it was very significant for me because it was the first time I'd actually delved into all the others around Mahler, especially Zemlinsky and early Berg and Schoenberg. And I must confess that this project, and again, this was 40 years ago, so you have to start somewhere. That whole sort of scintillating, vibrating world of tonality that broke finally with Schoenberg down the road. There's a great deal of phenomenal song literature at this time, and it had a profound influence on my programming and my life from there on forward. And I was living in Zurich. I drove down. The most astonishing thing, if you can think, and also that summer, Luciano Berio was commissioned to orchestrate some of the early songs of Gustav Mahler for Zubin Mehta. It was dedicated by Henri Louis to Zubin Mehta for his 50th birthday. And I sang the premiere, and we had such a good time, and Luciano loved it, that we went on and made 6 more. So that's why there are 11 songs in total orchestrated by Luciano Berio. And I remember the concerts and the rehearsals, and of course, riding around with Luciano Berio was a little bit sort of staggering. But, Kurt and Herta were still alive. Ringel was still alive. Lotte Klemperer was still alive. I mean, there were so many people that I met. It was very much at the beginning of my career, and especially in Europe. But I remember just sort of looking at the room and these gatherings we had, and having conversations with the most extraordinarily informed, living human beings of the era that some even knew. Certainly, knew Mahler. So it was 36 years ago. And I think a couple of years ago, I came back finally for the first time. But it's really grown, and it's become such a wonderful festival. But it's a marvelous memory, and it is not just my memory. It is the evidence of a very fundamental effort for Gustav Mahler that should have a remaining long life and a long echo.
Indeed, and I think the best way to put this is to mark the first 40 years. It is certainly a unique festival in the world, really, for having been around for so long and being so uniquely dedicated to Mahler. There are a couple of smaller things happening, but there's nothing really of the stature of this festival. And for those of you who have been to Mahler's composing hut, the fact that it's in Toblach, there's something very special about that composing hut. We'll talk more about the others because there are 3, of course. But I think there's something, sort of a living presence in that object, so to speak, that, yeah. You want to ask Marina something? Okay.
Marina, darling, is that when we first met? Were you here in 1985, or was it somewhere later that we first met? It feels like I've known you forever, but...
It seems the same for me. And I think it wasn't there because my main memory of Toblach is Henri Louis.
Yeah.
When he invited me, he was rather desperate about the zoo, the animals.
Yeah.
And he said, please, Marina, come and please can you reach out to the two people involved who have the house. And I came and stayed with him, and it was a wonderful time. And I remember walking along the little path with the animals on the side and walking and talking and actually a little bit like relating a fairy tale, but it was so vital for Henri Louis that it should become free, that space. And now I think it's very exciting. This is the now of the festival and Toblach, that Saskia Santer has linked with us all to make this a real, to make it happen. And that now the Häuschen will take its own life again and be a center also for small children coming, which thrills me, and linked to the festival in a big way. So I wish we could somehow communicate to Henri Louis that his deepest wish has been fulfilled, you know. But I remember many meetings with you, and my God, especially Amsterdam.
Yeah.
You know, you know, but it's become more and more so. And that's why we feel that we've known each other always, you know.
So you brought up the present, Marina, and I think for that I'd like to have Federico perhaps tell us a little bit more about the present of the festival. You're certainly deeply involved in a particular aspect of it, but perhaps you could summarize all the things that are happening now, because it certainly has evolved. In the old days, there wasn't even a real performance space of a more traditional variety. Right now, there's all kinds of opportunities available to us, and the festival has gone in many different directions and offers, of course, much more as the years go by. But you're also at the head of something very, very exciting and very new.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I can speak basically for the musicological part and for our task to connect the musicological thinking and reflecting on Gustav Mahler with the work of the musicians and with the work of composers, young composers, and also to come in a dialogue with the interest audience. And a festival, a Gustav Mahler festival is a special, a beautiful place to realize this project of connecting people who are working in different fields and from different perspectives on Gustav Mahler. So we founded this year Gustav Mahler Research Center in Toblach and Innsbruck. That means that we come from Innsbruck, but the research center is based in Toblach. That is a cooperation between the foundation Euregio Kulturzentrum Gustav Mahler and the University of Innsbruck, and we started some years ago with the Gustav Mahler Festival in Toblach to work in this direction, organizing workshops and inviting colleagues from all the world. And a very nice thing about Toblach and about Gustav Mahler in Toblach is that all colleagues from all the world are very happy to come to Toblach, and we usually don't need to refund the travel costs because they are so happy that they come on with taking their own costs. And so we built a very interesting advisory board constituted by colleagues from 8 different countries. So it's important for us to connect the local dimension, which is very important in Toblach. This is the reason, because everybody is so happy to come to Toblach with an international dimension, which is of course also a real identity of this place, and of course of Gustav Mahler. And we were talking about earlier on this topic. It is to connect different dimensions is usually not so easy, but in Toblach and in concerning Gustav Mahler is actually a very natural thing. And so we asked our colleagues to be active. So we don't want to have advisory board of name on the paper, but we asked for active colleagues, and so they were very enthusiastic, and we developed a plan of conferences, workshops, and summer school for the next 6 years. And in any of these events, we will have a different constellation of these colleagues and on the advisory board. And so we will...
I just wanted to point out something important, because there are 2 dimensions. This is both a scholarly venture that looks to creating a type of maybe where colleagues get together and talk about matters around Mahler and performance and all types of issues. But another very important aspect is the fact that we can then communicate those findings or those insights to a more general public. It's very important that we have the opportunity both to think and talk, so to say, among ourselves, but also, of course, to have a public venue as part of the festival where we can share some of those findings, some of those perspectives that emerge in a way that can be communicated to, as I say, a larger audience. Peter, you gave a talk yesterday on the Song of the Earth, which I thought really nicely put together exactly the type of maybe new perspective that might come from music scholarship, but is accessible, understandable, and exciting for a lay audience. So you're a musicologist, and you've done a lot of these kinds of talks. Tell us about the challenges of doing that and what you think is necessary to present to an audience in a way that communicates.
Yeah, I think 2 important things. There is a lot of change has been during the last 2 decades, also in Mahler research. As you heard, I'm since 2019 president of the International Gustav Mahler Society, and the society was primarily working on the critical edition, and now on the new critical edition, which is very important, but I think the scope must be widened, and the scope must be widened in different fields. One of the fields is we have activities in Steinbach, we have activities hopefully in Carinthia now, and of course in Toblach, and I think we must find a platform of a closer collaboration, also with Vienna, also with the International Gustav Mahler Society. And my aim is not to control anything, but we will cooperate on the same level. And I think that is very important. And so to concentrate these activities. And I think that could go into different fields, new fields of new ways of Mahler performances, also including not only the pure musical side, but the environment where these works were composed. I think it's important that we have activities in Steinbach, in Carinthia, and in Toblach, because we must include the surrounding, the sphere of the atmosphere Mahler surrounded when he composed these works. And we must perhaps, I will talk perhaps later, of new possibilities to promote this, even in the form of new compositions based on not only the music of Gustav Mahler, but the ideas of Gustav Mahler. I think we are a little bit too much fixed only purely to the music of Gustav Mahler and forget that he had really, I would say, future building ideas of new forms of performing the music. If you consider the 8th Symphony, for instance, if you consider compositional ideas even in the 3rd Symphonies or other works, there is a lot of possibilities of and new challenges for performing. And my aim as now president of the Mahler Society is to create a kind of platform for communication in this field, and so far to widen the scope of the activities the Mahler Society had in the last 65 years. I mean, it's always important. It was founded in the mid of the 50s. Bruno Walter, for instance, Erwin Ratz were among the founders, and we all know that was a direct link to Gustav Mahler at that time. Unfortunately, we don't have that, but we are very glad that we have Marina, and insofar also a direct link to Gustav Mahler.
So, Marina, you've been addressed, and I think it's important also to point out a second very, very central organization here, the Mahler Foundation, that you founded, and of course is looking to all corners of the world to inspire in the name of Mahler and to raise awareness. Could you tell us a little bit about what the foundation is doing, and perhaps how that could also contribute to new areas of exploring Mahler at festivals, particularly in Toblach, but also at the other composing huts?
Yes, the Mahler Foundation, really, I thought of it as a parallel energy in relation to the societies and the scholarly works that people have done. And I think in today's world, it's necessary to go back to the root of Mahler's thinking and feeling and ideas. He died before the First World War, which is something that always stuns me, because the world was a different place that he knew, the world he knew. And also nature was so far practically untouched. We live in a world where we've done more than touch nature. Nature was the fount of Mahler's work, as it is for all artists, but also all human beings. And the fact that he called himself the singer of nature, I think is an elemental truth which now we can spread far and wide. And part of also the reason for Mahler Foundation was I've always thought of Mahler as writing in the now. And he was also very interested in composers composing while he was alive. And I think you can't really love Mahler without having the curiosity to know what is being composed now in your own and our own time. And it's vital that we in some way reach out to and assist this kind of creativity. And because we live in the world of the media and film, the creation of these works has become it's a sort of multi-effort of all the arts together. And I think therefore we have to reach much wider. And you know, when you say that we have to reach wider than the works, this going beyond Mahler in his spirit, and as he would have liked, I can't imagine what he would have thought about whales dying with 80 plastic bags inside. He couldn't have conceived of a world which we have so ruined. And I think that in his name, there are many things. The thing of identity, the question of identity now, where we have a world filled with migrants, which will be doubled and tripled and quadrupled and tenfold if global warming, if the climate change continues at its pace. So I actually think I feel we have a mission, and we have very little time, and I think we must reach out. And I think it's what he would have wanted. It's not enough to go to a performance and come back and be thrilled and moved and even changed. One change is so that we are changed for a reason, so that we can do some good, so that we can change things around us. And I think it's time to do that. This is a huge amount of the reason why I made the Mahler Foundation, and I would be grateful. I'm grateful for all of your help, because on all levels it's really important to do this, and it's urgent by now. So there's much that we can do. We can think together, we can create together, we can reach out together, and we have to go beyond the people can take. We need to reach out in a different way, and we need to think of every human creature. And many are suffering now, and this is also part of it. Part of Mahler's spirit is that why did he love Dostoevsky so much? He didn't want to see suffering. So I think all of this is very much part of Toblach and Steinbach See. It's part of our links to China and to America and to South America and to the rest of the world. And we have to keep our arms wide open because the world is hurting.
So a central message, obviously, is cooperation. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do as a festival. We can't change the world as a festival, but we can raise awareness, and we can work with one another across festivals. And one of the great things that Toblach offers is its natural relatedness to the other composing huts that Mahler had built. In Steinbach was the first one in 1893. Then he, of course, built his villa in Meijernig in 1900, 1901, where he also had a composing hut. And when he came here after the tragic events of 1907, here to Altsturebach, where he had another hut built in 1908. So that's a type of continuity, that's a type of opportunity where three different locations are deeply connected to Mahler can also be connected to one another. Tom, you've been at all of these locations, you've performed at all of them. What do you think are some of the things that we can do as artists and as thinkers in these festivals to bind them together and perhaps to think more freshly about who Mahler was and what he can represent today?
Wonderful question, Marina. I've loved what you've all had to say. I was just sitting here thinking, if someone asked me to describe how I feel knowing what I know of Gustav Mahler through his works, it's just this overwhelming aliveness of Gustav Mahler. There's just this seething intellect, and there's this seething devotion to anything human. When you did the interviews for the Concertgebouw series, and I was glad to be part of that, there was a question that, what do you think Mahler wants to say in his music? Well, that's a ridiculous question. You could say endless and so forth. But I found myself saying, Mahler wants to say to people, wake up. What you said, Marina, that Mahler composed in the now. I think Mahler's great challenge to humanity is be in the now. Be focused on the meaning in life. The meaning of life is a wonderful conversation. It's a very interesting theological proposition. But at the end of the day, it must be about the meaning in life in the moment you are. And of course, the transcending word of all of that is love, which implies obviously various types of love, but philosophical. It begs of tolerance. It begs of respect. It begs of joining together, and that's going to your question, to simply be alive together and celebrate this aliveness. And of course, implied in also all of that, and I think this is the greatest mandate we all have as old white guys sitting up here, right, is that it is multicultural, it is multi-ethnical, and for all, the most important thing, and we've talked about this in the Gesellschaft, I don't want to be left out of the Gesellschaft. I spent 14 years of my life on the board of the Mahler Gesellschaft and devoted every second of it to it and love it. But we've had many discussions about the youth, about the next generations. Where are the next generations of musicologists? I, of course, am very passionate about the next generations of singers. We had hoped this year to start a masterclass series, literally Mahler and the Future. I have a series with that Adjo called Arts at Future. That is my mandate in my life. It's not giving it back, it's passing it on. So I agree with you completely. It's cooperation of like-mindedness in the world of Mahler. It's bursting the bounds of eighth notes and movements of symphonies to the reason why Mahler wrote what he wrote. I love that quote. I said it the other day. You know, Mahler said, at the end of the day, the human being is nothing more than an instrument on which the universe plays. I mean, that is such a beautiful thought if you unpack that in any way. So I think our mandate is very clear. Invigorate the youth, widen whatever inroads we possibly can into the world of Gustav Mahler. Everything he wrote came from a reason. We can be fascinated as musicians what's there on the paper, but it's about listening and being alive and having that be the soundtrack of your life or life in general that I think enlivens and invigorates so many people. Why he's, without question, if not the most, one of the most top 5, if that's the listing kind of thing, popular composers today. There is something, even when people don't understand, there's something that resonates and said, I must listen to this music. It is telling me something about a universe that I belong in.
Well, that raises the ante for what we can do at a festival, certainly. But it's also, I think, a worthy challenge to think beyond, perhaps, as you were saying, the notes. There's lots more going on. And I think one of the very inspiring aspects of Toblach that I have also been finding more out about this week is there are many initiatives. We've heard from Federico who are talking about the research aspect and sharing musicological insight. We have Stefan Hakenberg here, who's going to be leading a young group of composers who will be putting together new works in the spirit of, I think, Das Lied von der Erde for next year, and to inspire literally new composers to think in new ways, but maybe a little bit in the legacy of Mahler as well. There are initiatives, of course, I mean, not to do away with any of the more traditional programming. They're essential. Having inspiring performances, having venues where people can come and listen to music. But I think Mahler does present a unique opportunity to go beyond the merely musical event, because there is something about listening to Mahler that communicates more than a musical event. There is something, as you just said, very insightfully, there's something about listening to Mahler or becoming a part of what he seems to be expressing that takes us beyond merely a nice evening. It's not just a nice evening. It's something that asks more of us. It asks us to consider who we are. And ultimately, we as people putting on festivals and participating in them requires of us that type of diligence and that ability to bring also that type of messaging through in what we do. So we've come now from the past into the present, and let's talk a little bit about the future, because in a sense we've set the stage for that. What are we going to be doing? You can tell us a little bit more, perhaps, Federico, about what you will be doing in terms of the dialogues and of the Forschungsstelle, the research center here, and that, I'm assuming, will also be in the spirit of what we just talked about.
Yes, I would like to start with thinking and speaking about a particular aspect of Mahler's music and work. We were, Stefan Achenberg and me, we were talking about on this today. Gustav Mahler music inspired an incredible, a lot of composers after him to work on ideas, on music, and also composers like Schoenberg and his pupils who produced music which is very different from the music of Mahler. And this aspect is very interesting, and it is probably a particularity of the work of Gustav Mahler. I think there are not many composers in the early modernism who inspired so many composers after him, also in our days. And so it is very easy to work in this direction with Stefan, because young composers are inspired today still very much by Gustav Mahler. And the same is for the musicological research. There are few composers who are comparable in thinking on the plurality of topics and approaches and kind of research we can do with Mahler. And this is, of course, also caused by the richness of his cultural interest and background. Peter Revers was speaking about this yesterday, and this is still actual, this aspect. So is very inspiring to work on Mahler as a musicologist, as a composer, as a musician, as interest people who listen to the concert and to his music. So it is easy for us to develop a project for the future, because this aspect of the future is radicated in the music of Mahler and in his I would say in his personality. It's also a very famous sentence of him about the future. So I want to speak too long. We are thinking some of these possible topics, and we would like to connect our work as musicologists on this topic, like music and nature, or the compositional reception of Gustav Mahler in the 20th and 21st century, or the medial perspective on Mahler's music and humor, and so on, to connect these topics with the programmation of concerts and with the work of young composers. So we will try in the future to develop topics who connect musicologists, musicians, composers, and audience. That is so.
Peter, as the president of the International Gustav Mahler Society, you talked about how that organization might be able to, certainly not to do all of the things that happen at the festivals, but perhaps to serve as a kind of connection between them, or to, I don't know if I think we can announce, not really announce, but at least say there's one idea that we had that was also brought up yesterday about a recording prize. You and I were talking a little bit about that today. I don't know if we can make this this is not an announcement, but it's at least an idea.
Yeah, well, I think a recording prize would give some important signs what are really inspiring new tendencies in Mahler interpretation, and I think I think that should be the primary challenge of such a prize. And insofar, I would say we must, and we heard yesterday a wonderful example with Mahler's Seventh Symphony, yeah, for new concepts of, I would say, lucidity in interpretation, which is really remarkable and uncomparable, in my opinion, with other interpretations. And I think those ideas, which are also very important ideas Mahler had himself, yeah, could give some guidelines for such a prize, I would say. And
we mustn't overlook the fact that, of course, that here in Toblach there was a recording prize that was handed out for many, many years that has been discontinued. But we might revive that and have it associated perhaps with all three of the composing houses as it was associated with Toblach.
So the only problem is we hope we find a rich founder for such
for that we have the International Gustav Mahler Society to organize and perhaps serve as a guide in that process.
May I add one point to Thomas? I think it's really, I thank you very much, and it's so important to be aware of that aspect of reality in Mahler's works, and also a proto reality. If you consider das irdische Leben or such songs, then you have really, I would say, the dark side of life, and he doesn't hide the dark side of life. But it's also, on the other side, is always open for the world of dream, and a dreamlike state which is the total difference to that suffering and pain. And I think we should make people more aware for that sphere. Mahler is also a composer who can give a lot of hope and at least a sparkle of light in the darkest spheres of life. And I think if we consider this, both aspects would give also perhaps some new ideas for interpretation. Yeah.
Mahler suffers from a reputation of negativity, I would say, if I just had to use one word. And I think that's doing him a grave injustice as a human being, as a composer, as a loving father and husband, someone who loved nature, who spent much time communing with nature. I think perhaps the public sort of irritated conductor view of Mahler, or someone writing that music that also includes death, but of course many sides of life, that has skewed the reception of Mahler in ways that are grossly, I think, misrepresentative of who he was as a human being. And I think that's another challenge that we have in bringing not just the programming, but how we talk about it, how we as musicologists, but also how it's received popularly. And as you say, how it can influence performers, conductors who perform these symphonies, but also singers, of course, and others who are inspired by his example. Would you say that's the case, Marina? Who was Gustav Mahler to you, and what can his life say in a positive way?
Well, I think his music it speaks of revelation and the most incredible love, which is all embracing and all understanding. You know, there is the Madonna del Parto is one of the greatest paintings in the world, because on this face, Piero della Francesca, there is all the suffering in the world and all the beauty in one face. It's the most extraordinary. I saw it for the first time and I wept for a long, long time. And this is what Mahler does to you, because what is everyone looking for? We are looking to go beyond the daily. We are looking to go beyond the material. And we are trying to find a way to phrase the eternal. And he gives us a door into the eternal. What could be more generous and loving, you know? So I think that it's all there, and it transforms people's lives. The more I lead this strange double life, but because people say to me what it means to them, and it becomes more and more moving. It's another reason why I made the Mahler Foundation, because I could see that people want to share their feelings of Mahler. They need to communicate, not just to communicate, but to communicate what Mahler, how it's changed their lives, how it's affected them. We call it the Mahler effect, but I think it's hugely hopeful in a time when we are living in great extremes. Politically, socially, everything is in turmoil, and I think this brings a lot of light, which is the needed, the necessary element. And it speaks of the elemental. It goes beyond the fragmentary, and it goes beyond the ordinary, and it goes beyond the things that weigh people down. It does the opposite, you know. So it presents that level of living which we all crave and which we all lean towards. I mean, that's where life is going. You know, it's not going down, it's going upwards.
Well, that's
what the music does. And that's why people seem to need it.
I agree, that's what's needed. But I also want to get practical for one moment. I've mentioned this in passing. Actually, it's come up numerous times tonight. And I just wanted to, this is a bit of an announcement. Now that there are 3 composing huts, each with their own summer event, each of them happening in July. The leadership for those 3 festivals are talking to one another. There is a new event that was just formed a few weeks ago. Thomas, you were there as part of that inaugural event. It's called the Mahler Forum for Music and Society, founded in Klagenfurt. There at the Composing Hut in Meiernig, every year there will be an event. Right now it's a modest 2-day event. That, of course, is preceded by Steinbach am Attersee, which is a 4-day festival, which will be also happening in July next year. And, of course, we'll have the Toblach Festival, as always, next year as well, which is generally a 2-week event. And we are trying to coordinate our times, our dates, closely enough so that if you are really interested in taking the Gustav Mahler tour, getting festival passes and really imbibing in the glory of all of this, and you should know that that's being planned now, the coordination and the dates, and we will be announcing, certainly on the Mahler Foundation, but also each of these festival pages will be announcing this cooperation, and we'll be trying to make it more accessible to everyone who is interested in this. I think in the spirit of cooperation, but also beyond that, we are thinking about topics, themes, ideas, sharing resources, perhaps also talents who can help us think and present this material so that there's a type of continuity of thought and thematic idea. That will take a little bit longer, but there's lots of exciting ideas that will be embracing much of what we've talked about today. the youth, getting youth involved, getting the local citizens involved, getting new compositions, getting maybe new types of music involved, folk music or other types of music that has sort of been left outside the concert hall. Many, many ways of reaching to what Mahler himself was also thinking, expressing, and recreating in his own works. So that is happening. It's being planned for next year. It will be announced. It'll be more detail, but looks like we'll be able to give you basically 3 festivals in 2 weeks in a semi-coordinated fashion, and hopefully this will continue to grow. And the more we have resource of musicology and performance and the support of Mahler Foundation and the International Gustav Mahler Society, the more this will take on, I think, a breadth and depth that everyone will benefit from. The audiences, but certainly also the festival and the people who are leading them. So that is one aspect of the future that I think is very, very exciting, one that's literally coming together now, and we have much to look forward to. Peter, looks like you want to say something. Did you want to say something?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. There are plans for future activities during the lectures and the activities for Toblach. I think later Federico can talk a little bit about that. Yeah, and I think one good idea could be to combine compositional aspect and musicological aspects more closely. I will give 2 examples, and I come back to the idea which I mentioned before, new aspects of performance, new modes of performance. In Mahler's time, there were limits, we know, but in his compositions were ideas of performance which couldn't be realized in his time, but which could be realized nowadays. I will give one example. In the first movement of the 3rd Symphony, Mahler does something extraordinary. He has a kind of collage of different marches, organized, not in going to atonality, but you hear several musics at the same time, yeah, in a way. And I think this idea of different musics coming together, especially in a site like Toblach, where you have so many possibilities, the mountains and the hills and the valleys, yeah, to create some idea of a space music combined with this idea of collage. We know that the idea of space music was developed, it didn't develop too much if we think of Charles Ives, for instance, and his Universe Symphony, which was a great idea, but hardly realized. But I think those ideas we could promote, and we could, we could ask young composers to find ideas for such solutions. A space music and with the idea of different musics coming together. We always must remember one, I would say, fundamental experience of the very, very young Mahler in Iglau, this tremendous big square where different groups of music were coming together and meeting at this central place. Different musics at the same time coming to one result. That's one thing. A second thing which I think could promote new ideas is to go beyond the sphere of pure music to space and to light. If we consider that Gustav Mahler in the first performance of his 8th symphony asked Alfred Roller to organize the light in the hall, then we see that light, colors, music are in a way combined in a very new way. We also know that those ideas were continued by composers like Scriabin, but not really realized. It was more the idea. And I think to find ways of combining different sensual challenges, not by chance, but they must be organized and well coordinated, could be something interesting. And we have an example in Mahler's works.
Wow, that is future music, and that does sound like an exciting project for us. I was thinking about different types of music as a as one of your strengths, Thomas, because you've as much as people love you on the operatic stage, you're just as interested in American popular folk song and things like that. You explore that richness in your own work. And do you feel this type of kindred spirit there, or what are we getting out of that, bringing that diversity into the performance space the way that you do that? Because that's clearly one of your main points of inspiration and initiative.
Well, I love what you were talking about, Peter. It's a wonderful idea, and knowing a little bit something about Ives, this cacophony of sound that can appear because of a melange of different, as you say, voices or music in a particular space, and Ives was fascinated by that, and would have marching bands come. But certainly this was a huge influence in Mahler. But in the song repertoire, I think that you know, there's just so much still to be protected in some way, if that's the right word, because but protected that we don't ever lose sight of the keim of the source of why he wrote these songs. I mean, the songs, and you and I, Morten, we did this project where we really told the biography of Mahler through his songs. And the Das Kamen Wunderhorn, I think that the Das Kamen Wunderhorn could use a bit of a dusting off. I think we need to understand, really understand across the world the essence of what folk song is. We have this strange idea that it's a genre unto itself, and it's born of some Ur-Mensch under some Ur-tree in an Ur-cave in an Ur-land next to an Ur-lake, saying something profoundly Ur. And that's exactly what folk song isn't. And Herder was the first one that inspired. And I don't want to hold a lecture here, but the point of folk music or folk song, especially, is the cream that remains in the collective memory. And I think this is what is so passionate about Mahler's music. I think that it's articulating somehow things that will be timeless, that are timeless, about why humans do and are motivated to do and think what they are. And this must expand in our new now to understand other ethnicities. And I think that is and I think we have to, first of all, a bit address Mahler's perspective in his time, which has turned out to be in some ways, and I don't mean to start a whole nother conversation here, but a little bit on the wrong side of history. And it's tied in with Dvorak, it's tied in with their time in America. Mahler, in his time in America, was passionate about understanding the forces of cultural movements within America, but that's a subject unto itself. So yes, it's an inexhaustible. It is a new frontier. It hasn't been explored. If I may, I still think that in the performance of Mahler's music today, and I realize that everyone's quite anxious to explore new, and that's terrific. But I'm not completely convinced that we should move on from the world that Mahler played in. I think the instrumentarium and the color and sound and phraseology that is inherent in the instrumentarium that would have been of his time, as well as the diapason, are incredibly important conversations to have. You know, the good thing about Mahler is that, you know, anybody comes in and buys the tickets and listens to the Third Symphony, the Second Symphony. It is so unfassbar unterhaltend. It's a little bit like going to the opera. You know, it's like, my God, how do they make that kind of sound? Wow. And they go to a Mahler symphony and go, my God, there's 125 people banging and thrashing about and all these consecutive. And yet it's all born out of a meticulous musical element solely for the purpose, if we believe what Mahler says of himself, to demonstrate the human being as an instrumentarium of the universe. We can never let it slide into this morass of unbelievable wonder without grasping at where it comes from and what it always was reflecting back to. And so I think we have a lot of frontiers yet to be true to Mahler. I love challenging new ways as long as they're born of a knowledge of what was there first. I don't want to be clever by three. I want to be innovative on genius.
Yeah, that's very well put together, the whole idea of course, building on a legacy that is in itself innovative and ever fresh. You know, so it's being historically aware, but tapping into aspects that still lie there undiscovered, and that's one of the, I think, wonders of Mahler. You just the more you look, the more you find. And as we go into the future, as we're talking about now, of the Toblach Festival and festivals in general, and of course of how to present Mahler, we're going to find ever more new things, especially if we have the mindset that you just opened up for us, Thomas, and that is the maintaining the message of his inexhaustible curiosity, his inexhaustible love for humanity, his inexhaustible need to express that essential human experience. That will be with us forever, because we are human, after all. And if we can bring that into our futures as musicologists, as performers, as festival administrators, we will have much to say going forward, and whether it be in different types of musics, in bringing in the folk, in bringing more musicological perspective, in creating new compositions, all of this will lead to an ever unfolding aspect of this incredible musical genius. So I think that's a nice way of sort of wrapping up our visions of the future here. We're open to questions and certainly open to suggestions, because after all, what's on the table is literally the future. And if you have any thing you'd like to say, or you as audience members, I don't know if we have a chat function on our live feed. We'd love to hear from anyone. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to contribute to a thought, a reflection, a suggestion, an idea? Hans-Jörg Viertler.
Thank you all for being here and for your propositions and Vorschläge. It's very important. What I would say is, I have to say it in German because I have to find the right words. So maybe afterwards you will translate it. Ja, es sind jetzt 40 Jahre, dass wir an diesem Festival arbeiten, aber nicht arbeiten, unser Leben gestaltet haben. Wir waren damals nicht einmal 30 Jahre alt und sind jetzt vom Komitee, und ich wundere mich, dass ich fast der Einzige bin vom Komitee. Die anderen sind wahrscheinlich alle schon im Bett. Also wir sind jetzt alle über oder nahe 70. Und die Frage ist, wir haben ein Kind in die Welt gesetzt damals, ohne zu wissen, dass es so alt werden würde. Und es ist, glaube ich, an der Zeit, dass wir es gehen lassen. Aber nicht gehen lassen, indem wir es nicht mehr nicht mehr Acht geben, sondern dass es mit anderen gehen lernt. Und die Chance und die Absicht, die wir auch hatten hier, man hat mich gefragt, ob ich nicht auch hier vorne sitzen möchte und meine Meinung sagen würde. Mir war wichtig, heute die Sicht von außen zu erkunden und mich zu fragen, gibt es nur uns, die wir in Toblach dieses Festival veranstalten können, oder gibt es auch Menschen, die mit Freude in Toblach gemeinsam mit uns etwas veranstalten, etwas ins Leben Neues oder für dieses Festival etwas gestalten möchten, dass das Festival wächst und mehr in der Welt bewirkt, als es eben heute bewirken kann. Es war in den Anfängen, waren wir eher junge und verrückte Leute, jetzt sind wir Gesetzte und in unseren vielleicht Erfahrungen auch nicht behindert, sondern eingeschränkt. Und es braucht Innovation mit Tradition zusammen und ein Feuer, das wir gemeinsam versuchen, in die Zukunft zu tragen.
So I'm going to briefly summarize. Hans-Jörg Viertler just spoke. Hans-Jörg Viertler is an essential member of the committee now for, I think, 35 of those 40 years. Yeah. And he said that he feels that I'm summarizing now that this was not 40 years of work. This was 40 years of an investment in who we are and who we've become is really also reflected in this festival. And looking around the room, he doesn't find too many members of that original committee. Wondering if maybe many of them were already at home at sleep. The message being, we need more innovation in Toblach. Hans-Jörg Viertler has reflected on how they were young and thirsty and wanted to change the world when they were younger, and now, of course, that has changed. And it's time for fresh blood, new ideas, and even though Hans-Jörg Viertler was invited to be part of this panel, he insisted on not being part of the panel because he, precisely for the reason that he was expecting and hoping to find not only reassurance in the fact that there's deep interest in what's happening now, but a new vision perhaps for the future, and a confirmation that this is important and that there are other people involved in other locations and other festivals, and that this impetus has a future. And as it's time to let, so to speak, the baby go, to let it grow and to let it become something more than it has in the past, and that it has a bright future ahead of it. Hans-Jörg, I can't make promises, but I certainly have the feeling that there is a bright future, certainly for Toblach. I hope tonight we've been able to demonstrate some of the reasons why. There are many ways of connecting and many ways of enhancing the impact and scope of what happens here in Toblach, at the other composing huts in the Mahler world, but beyond, far beyond. Because ultimately, as Marina says, this is about humanity. This isn't about just the composer who composed a few pieces down the street. This is much bigger than that. And I think... Yes?
It's not geographical.
No, that's right.
It goes beyond the geographical. And in any case now, with the media, we are all linked way beyond what it was possible to do before. Not just because of COVID, but after, as we develop, it's going to become a different world for us. But we should take that in the hopeful sense, and we should make things come together, which before were much more difficult. And I take great hope from the possibilities. But we all have to do it together, and we have to reach way beyond our single geographic spot. We must link far beyond that, and not only with like-minded people, we have to reach out to the people who think completely differently and different cultures.
Absolutely.
There are great things that we can do, and it should give us huge hope and energy so that we can begin to do them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and age is just an idea. It's not that we are young and then, and then we get older.
Take that to heart, Hans-Jörg.
No. There are old young people and young old people. So, I mean, age is just an invention. Energy, about energy. And we all can muster energy, and it's a task, a life task.
Indeed.
to muster that energy.
So, another opportunity for anyone to speak out and share ideas. Thank you, Hans-Jörg. That's an essential aspect of this evening, and I'm very glad to hear that we heard from you as well. Anyone else want to share a thought, a reflection? Yes, Louis Eckstein.
What we did in Holland gave some students of the conservatory, the composition class, the task of orchestrating the songs Mahler did not orchestrate. And they did that not only music, but also with performance, like with ballet and so and so. So maybe this is an idea that can be expanded.
Sure, that sounds like a great idea. And of course, the Mahler Foundation also has a very good connection to, of course, Amsterdam, as does the Mahler Society. So we need to talk more about that, absolutely. I think Nigel, you raised your song. Nigel raised his hand as well.
Thank you. It's very interesting, the various points of view, and just taking up what Marina was saying, in my opinion, Gustav Mahler is much more relevant today than he was when he composed his music. Because his music, his notes are like the paintbrush of a painter. He's painting beauty, he's painting life, he's painting hope, he's painting pleasure in the beauty of nature. But I wanted to ask something specific to Mr. Hampson, if it was possible. I've been reading in the last couple of years many books about Mahler because I have a bit more time on my hands. In one of them, I found a very interesting comment where the author was saying, for the people playing in the orchestra, Mahler's music, it's almost as if it was developed not by a composer, but by a sound engineer. The sound of the people in the orchestra kind of hovers above them. It moves from one part of the orchestra to the other as if it was in space, and even the person who's playing the instrument is taken to another dimension, to another world. Of course, the audience is as well, but even the people playing the instruments who are playing Beethoven, Mozart, every composer you can think of. What I wanted to ask Mr. Hampson was, who performs not just Mahler, as I think he'll be doing tomorrow evening, when you perform Mahler, Mr. Hampson, do you feel any different than performing Zemlinski or anybody else? Could you explain why Mahler is different from a performer's point of view?
I'd like to go to bed and rest for tomorrow night's concert. And you've asked a question that should beg opening a wine for everyone that we can sit and chat for the next 2 or 3 hours. It's a wonderful question, and you're absolutely onto something that is quite extraordinary. You know, the musical elements of Mahler, I've seen grown orchestras cry, if I may say metaphorically, because they'll start playing what looks to be very ordinary, and I don't mean that negatively, but very, very simple is also a terrible word, but, you know, very readable, understandable notes on a page. And yet they get into sort of the 9th or 10th bar, and they're looking ahead at the 12th and 13th bar, and all of a sudden they have no idea where they are. They've just entered into some landscape of sound that has taken them into their own, far beyond their own interpretive ideas. They're truly a vehicle. And this can be quite disturbing to performers. And it's been quite interesting to see that happen when I've done the songs with orchestras, because they seem very straightforward. And yet there is this illuminous otherness that happens in a performance. Directly to respond to your question, to save our time, singing a lot of songs in a different lot of genres and languages and all that sort of thing. What is unique to Mahler songs? Certainly an imaginative sense of picture. It's impossible to sing Mahler songs without having a very specific, and it can be very unique to each individual, but a very specific picturesque idea of where this is happening and who's saying what and to what purpose. whether it be on a hill or in a place or to another person. It's a very film. It's like there's a film track that goes on that is more demonstrative than other things, than other songs. But and I'm only studying around because it seems to be a direct extension of Schubert in that kind of bildhaftliche Welt that one is captured in. The astounding thing, it seems, and my esteemed colleagues can speak to this in far more detail, but the extraordinary, if the right word is manipulation, of very specific and sometimes simple musical elements in Mahler's music is a we say in German, a Drehscheibe, that can take the most fundamental emotions and turn them on their head in a very, very rapid way, and yet not change harmony in that sense. You know, I'm stuttering around here a little bit. These kinds of things are very much in the world that you're describing, and yes, they are very apparent and very unique to Gustav Mahler. Over the years, I've just found that there's such a imploring of the master, of all musicians involved in his music, to have a conversation in music with one another. And playing in an orchestra, it seems to me that this transportation that you spoke of is really, in some ways in his music, more aware of other people in the same space, if you will, playing in an orchestra, being part of a larger conversation that they're all having with one another. The sense of dialogue in Mahler's music is so overwhelming, it seems to me, in a very positive way. And that in the music of the singing music is quite interesting, because very often with the orchestra, what I'm saying is the least important. What the horn is playing, or what the duet between the English horn and the first strings, you know, this is really what he's talking about. And this is what's so fascinating to me in Mahler's music, is that whether it's word or sound or tone or harmony or rhythm, it's all in a conversation that is illuminating something that is much, much larger than ourselves. Don't ever ask me a question like that.
Okay, I think, unless there are more questions, that are pretty... Oh, there is another question. Stefan Hackenberg.
Yeah, perhaps less a question than a remark, just to add towards what you have been saying. The voice that we know of Mahler's, the invitation to participate, is something rather moving for a lot of people, and I'm putting together this concert with the young composers that we've heard of quite a bit tonight, and when I approached them, nobody said no. Everybody said yes immediately, and not only that, but with a tone of relief is what I felt. Yes, we would like to communicate in some way with the music of Mahler. So that was a very wonderful experience, and I'm very hopeful, of course, for the future, the near future in that case, just next year. A very diverse group of people that we'll be able to present here with definitely very different tones and very different compositions. And as a composer myself, I really want to say how impressed I am of a situation in which, even though we are talking about Mahler, we are at the Mahler Festival, this openness and generosity towards young people and new and different voices is unique, and thank you for that.
Certainly. If anyone represented youth and identity and the questions of identity in himself and the difficulties involved and the need to be open for that, it was certainly Mahler. Something about the immediacy of reaction and the positive reaction of young people. First of all, that says a lot about what Mahler still means. not just to most of the people in this room, but to young people who are still learning to hear and discovering this music that just puts itself in a completely different category from all other music. And you know, yes, I'd love to be a part of something like this. I can say, and I'm going to maybe give the last word to you, Marina. I think one of the things that that we've discovered with Mahler Foundation is that there's an incredible awareness, first of all, of Mahler and his mission and his legacy, but also a willingness to participate in that legacy today. We've contacted people all over the world, and just like Stefan Hagenbeck says, no one has ever said no.
No, there's a kind of longing, and as if it were, you know, like planets aligning. There's something interesting going on, because there's so much going on in our world, and so energies coming from all different directions, and of course young people are searching, and it's very, very beautiful that it doesn't matter which country, which area, which culture, which background, which religion, there is this wonderful warmth and need as well, and understanding, and it speaks to everyone, and I think it speaks to children as well. So I think that as the hope for the future obviously lies with young people and children, that's what we should reach out to more and more, because they understand far more than we do.
Okay, I think that's a wonderful way that we can end the evening. And thank you so much for everyone for coming. Thank you, Peter Revers, Federico Celestini, Thomas Hampson, Marina Mahler. Thank you for joining us from Spoleto. Thank you, everyone.